Like I said, I'm such a huge fan. This is personal for me. Okay, I'm a huge fan. So today I'm going to be talking with Rachel Hawkins, who also writes as Erin Sterling, and we're going to be talking about her new book, The Kiss Curse. And I'm just so excited to have you here with us today, Rachel.
Thank you so much, Angela. I'm so excited to be here and to get to talk about this book. Like, I love this time when things kind of start, firing up, and I finally get to talk about the people that lived in my head for 2 years.
Yes. So before we dive in, I just kind of want to know what inspired you to become a writer.
Oh gosh, so many things. Like, I think like a lot of people that do this job now, I was a very bookish little kid. I loved to read, and I think reading is always kind of the seed of
Mhm.
of writing. I always tell that's like some of my advice for aspiring writers too, is always like read, read, read as much as you can. So yeah, I just kind of loved books. I loved making up stories. I realize now that a lot of the like imaginative play I did as a kid was basically writing without actually putting words to paper. But anytime you're doing like dress up or Barbies or dolls or whatever, you're creating story.
Right.
And so I was doing that, yeah, my whole life. I finally became an actual writer because I was teaching high school English, and I started reading a lot of YA. So I started out as a YA author,
Mhm.
and that kind of reading YA and working with teenagers, I was like, I don't really want to be a teacher anymore because that's hard. I don't know if you know, but
Yeah.
it turns out public education is very difficult, not because of the kids, but just all the other stuff. And so then yeah, I was like, okay, well maybe this is a way that I can, if I sit down and write a YA novel, I can still work with books and kids, but I don't have to grade any more essays. So yeah, it sort
Which
of
is
all
always a plus.
exactly. So it all kind of like spiraled from there. Yeah.
Well, I just like everybody else loved the X Hex last year. It was definitely one of my favorite books of last year. I was mildly obsessed with it for a point in time. But I didn't really like connect with the Vivian character. Like I loved her as a character.
Yeah.
I loved Reese, obviously. I loved the story. So I was so excited to see when you were going to write about Gwen as our
Yes.
main character. I connect with her so much as a human.
Yeah.
So was this something that was always the plan to write about Gwen and kind of carry the story on? Or was it just like you couldn't get rid of these characters after you finished the X Hex?
Yeah, I'd always planned for there to be more than just one book. And I always knew I wanted to write about Gwen. Vivi is kind of like the least like me character I think I've ever written in a lot of ways, whereas Gwen, I'm also much more of a Gwen girl. So I knew that I wanted to sort of explore her character in another book. So yeah, and also like I just wanted to go back to Graves Glen. Like, those books genuinely are such a pleasure to write because
Mm,
I love Halloweeny things, and it lets me kind of indulge in all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, I always knew that I wanted to write about Gwen. It was just kind of figuring out what her story was.
right. And as far as like all the witchy stuff, I love all the puns. There's so many
Yeah.
like witchy puns in this one. I'm literally gonna make every t-shirt that Gwen wore, I think, in
Yeah,
this book
excellent.
because I love that too. Has that always kind of been something that has been sort of a staple for you? Like not just Halloween, but like the witchy stuff and things of that nature.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been into that kind of thing. And I guess back like 2016, 2017, I got really into tarot cards.
Mm.
I've joked that I feel like every woman became a witch around that time. I can't imagine. Um, and, and so I'd gotten super into tarot and crystals. The crystals thing is hilarious because my husband's a geologist.
Oh,
So God
love
love
it.
him like for really supporting me and me being like, these rocks are magic. um, but yeah, so I'd always kind of been into that stuff. I was never like a super big Halloween person, weirdly enough. Like I'm not good at like decorating my house for holidays, or
Mhm.
like, I don't have that skill. But and when I wrote this book in like fall of, I guess it was fall of 2019, I just suddenly like wanted to go all in. I was having kind of, life was hard at that time. There was just a bunch of stuff going on, and I just wanted something. I wanted to spend time in this like really comforting world. And so then all of a sudden it was like I said, I've always loved like horror and spooky stuff and like ghost hunting shows and stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
there was something about like fall of 2019 that like really awakened my inner Halloween person.
And what inspired you to kind of add in this academia side where there is so much with the college, and I love all those scenes that take place in the college and the other professors we kind of get to see throughout the story. What inspired you to add that into this world in particular?
Part of it is, I mean, I myself live in a college town. I live in Auburn, Alabama, War Eagle. And so I think that's part of it. Like that's like my daily life is kind of getting around,
Sure.
college students. I love like a good dark academia vibe as well. My husband was a professor for years, so like I was very well versed in that kind of thing. And it was also partially because I had in the first book really wanted Vivi to have a very normal job.
Hmm.
And so I was like, I like the idea that she's a history teacher, but it's in a very like not even witchy history. She just and so it was kind of that, and it did. It just sort of I think like when we think of like fall and autumn, yes, we think of Halloween and things like that, but I think school starts back in autumn, and so it all kind of like enhanced the vibe. Basically, they just went well together.
And what, if any more, will we see from Graves Glen, if there's anything you can say about that?
Yeah, so there will be a third book because I just sold it recently to my publisher. And I
Yay.
mean, without giving too many spoilers away, I mean, there are three brothers.
Mm-hmm.
One brother hasn't had a book yet. So, and that one is going to be a little bit different. We're not going to spend as much time in Graves Glen
Mm-hmm.
because obviously, if you know that brother, he doesn't spend that much time there. So we'll
Right.
see. I always want to see the other characters still interacting, and family is such a theme in these books for
Mm-hmm.
like for both the Jones ladies and the Penhallows. It's such a thing. But yeah, we'll be going a little further afield, but still very spooky. There's ghosts. There's a little light time travel. There are curses. It's going to be a good time.
So I kind of like how it ended up kind of in a way being a little bit of a twist in of itself, that it's more, I mean, while we're obviously following Gwen and Vivi, I like how it did kind of it is turning out to be more about the brothers in,
Right.
and I really like that because it was like it's kind of a throwback to your suspense books, right? Like it's like
Exactly.
there was still a twist.
Yes.
So I love it.
Yeah, and that's fun too to like, I always love comparing and contrasting those families and how like
Hmm.
Vivi and Gwen and Elaine are such a solid unit and they care about each other so much. And then the Penhallow brothers are all trying to figure out their own way while having the dad that they have. And like what does that look like for each of them has been a surprisingly fun thing to play with in those books.
That was really such a fun dynamic in this book in particular, because we
Right.
do get more of that family dynamic of what is happening with Wells and his father, and we see more of that. And this book was so interesting in that since it was new, it was all like getting to know each other in a way
Yes.
that it wasn't pre-established. So I really like that about this book, that we are getting so much more background and
Mhm.
so much of that, like what that means to what that means in the sense of emotions to have
Yeah.
had that kind of upbringing, I guess. So that was a really cool thing with this book.
Well, thank you, because that was definitely a thing that I was really thinking about, and two, in the ways in which like that was such a big part of Wells's development,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt like that kind of stuff was so established for him in the first book, even when he's like just a very side character that we hear from
Right.
occasionally. It's made very clear though that he is his dad's right hand man
Mm-hmm.
and favored son and all that, and so but like what does that look like, from his side of things was just an interesting thing to unpack.
And it really played into the spicy factor as well. Like
Yeah.
this was so different in the way that, in the first book, it was established, it was like a second chance kind of thing. And in
Right.
this book, it was like, it was burning hot, it was burning fast. And it was
Yeah.
like, it was so interesting to read that where it is so different. There's so many times you read um, spicy books in general, and they're so similar. Like the scenes
Right.
are very cut and paste. And with this, it was so different and in a way that really, really played to the emotional part of the story. And that was just so cool to read.
Well, good. I'm so glad that you picked up on that because yeah, I do. I think that's really important. I think that any romance novelist will tell you like the spicy scenes are so important for that kind
Mm-hmm.
of thing. They're not just there to be like, and now's the part where they have sex,
Right,
They
right,
need to tell you something about these characters, they about the journey that they're on together emotionally and now physically. And it was kind of fun, like, I loved writing a second chance romance in the X Hex, but like they had already been there with each other. So it was that
right,
sort of thing. The tension sort of comes from like, we have been together, we know how good it could be together, and we're trying not to do that again.
right.
And whereas this definitely has like the sort of newness and discovery aspect, which was, again, it was super fun to work with.
So let's switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about the books that you write as Rachel Hawkins,
Yes.
your suspense and thrillers. I absolutely loved The Wife Upstairs. It was
Oh, thank you.
so amazing. I loved it. And Reckless Girls as well was so good.
Yeah.
So what inspires you to write the different things? Like, is it
Yeah.
just you have a story in your head, or, do you like have a plan? Oh, I'm going to write this and then I'm going to write this. What kind of inspires you to switch from two genres that are so completely different?
I think part of it, it's kind of a like, it's such an interesting mix of like both like my own sort of like emotional and creative needs, and also what for me feels like the smartest way of navigating the business of publishing.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote YA for 10 years and I really enjoyed doing that. But when that kind of started to slow down for me, which is just a natural sort of progression in a career
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, I think, especially when you write for kids, your audience
Sure.
grows up,
Yeah.
and sometimes you don't get the new ones coming in. And so I never really wanted to have all my eggs in one basket again. Like when I was like really sort of because this career path is something that like I very much chose and like
Mm-hmm.
put into motion. So it's not like something that just sort of randomly happened. This was exactly where I wanted to be. And that was part of it. Like, I love to read a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
So I do. I read a ton of romance. I read a ton of fantasy. I read a lot of thrillers. And I love doing both thrillers and romance. They really satisfy very different parts of just sort of, like I said, like my creative id, but also like the sort of technical writer part of it. Like I love really having in the romances to be like, are you doing this emotional journey justice between these two characters? Are you making it believable in
Mm-hmm.
320 pages that these two people have fallen in love? That's a challenge. And with the thrillers, obviously the twisty turny bits and the red herrings and the what is this story really about? Like, because it's not always, just about a mystery. That's really satisfying, but they're two very different things. So I mean, I'm behind all the time. Like 2 books a year, as it turns out, like a lot of work. But it's also like the best kind of work. And it's very easy to go back and forth between the two simply because they are so different. And I very purposely write them in very different voices. So like even like
Mm-hmm.
in like point of view tenses, the romances are all third person past. The thrillers I get a little more experimental with like first
Mm-hmm.
person present or whatever. And so yeah, it kind of keeps me like really engaged, really excited creatively. And so yeah, I think that's kind of why I decided to do it. It's fun, and it means that if one of those careers suddenly flops, hey, I've got this other one over here.
And what does your writing process look like? Is it different for the two genres, or is it kind of similar in the way that you approach your writing?
Yeah, I mean, the actual process of writing them is pretty much the same. I really, really hate to draft. I'm one of
Mm.
those people that I would much rather, like, I will edit all the live long day, but I hate those first drafts. And so I draft really fast so that
Mm.
I don't have to spend much time doing it. But that means that I spend a lot of time on both books doing a lot of pre-planning. I do outline now, but it's not like anything super formal. No, no capital letters, no Roman numerals, just like here's like a 10 to 12 page document that's like this is what happens in the book. And that allows me to move faster, and it allows me to kind of figure out, and this is especially big in the thrillers, like those issues that like will suddenly freeze you up, like, oh god, I haven't like said how much time has passed, is this all happening over two
Mm.
days that kind of thing. Or, oh wait, this doesn't make sense. You figure that out in this much smaller document rather than figuring it out when you're 50,000 words in and crying. So yeah, so for both of them I outline. They just sort of require like a different focus. Like with the romances, I'm not so worried about like how twisty the plotting is.
Right.
I'm making sure that I'm checking in on the progression of the relationship. Whereas with the thrillers, I always say that like you're never going to like surprise every thriller writer they read or reader they read too much. But I try to stay, I want the reader like one or two steps ahead of the characters, and I'm trying to stay one or two steps ahead of the reader. That's the kind of focus I'm looking at when I'm doing the thriller outlines.
So what is coming up next for you as far as publishing? What is coming up next?
So I have my next thriller from Rachel Hawkins coming out on January the 3rd called The Villa. Really excited about that one. It is a dual POV or dual timeline. In the present, we've got writer BFFs doing kind of like a writing retreat thing at a villa in Italy. But in that villa in Italy back in the 70s, there was a very scandalous murder. And so we sort of go back and forth as the two storylines begin to influence each other. If people liked the stuff in Reckless Girls where there's like emails and travel guides, sort of stuck
Mm.
in there,
Mm.
there's more of that, which I have such a good time doing, of like news articles and, that sort of thing. So I love that book, really excited about it. And then, like I said, I've got a third Graves Glen book that I'm assuming will be out next fall.
Mhm.
I'm still working on it right now. And then I have another thriller that I'm currently drafting right now that should be out in January 2024. And I sold a standalone romance that I'm really excited about. Again, should be like 2024, 2025. It's bonkers. I can't believe they're letting me do it. It's got more paranormal stuff. It's basically a 1960s set gothic rom-com.
Oh my
So, which I'm
gosh.
like, it's a thing. It's a thing. Gothic rom-coms. We're bringing them in. So, Sally Thorne just had, Angelica Frankenstein makes her man. So I'm like, hey, we
Hmm.
can we can have gothic rom-coms. Damn it. So
Well,
yeah,
I
very busy, but a good thing.
I am so excited for all of those things. Like I said, I have just really become a really huge fan of yours in all of the genres you write in. So I'm really excited for all of those things.
Thank you very much.
And where can everybody find you online?
So I have a website that's rachelhawkinsbooks.com or erinsterlingbooks.com. You can go to either one. They'll take you to both pages. And then I am on Twitter and Instagram as at Lady Hawkins on both places. And I usually post the Erin Sterling stuff to the Lady Hawkins account on Instagram as well. So yeah, that's about it. I've technically got a TikTok, but I haven't figured out how to use it yet. So when I get on that, I'll let everybody know.
Well, Rachel, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. I cannot wait for everybody to get their hands on this book. It is available September 20th. And that is The Kiss Curse by Erin Sterling.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
Thank you.